Good afternoon, everybody. It is Wednesday, November 19th, 2025. We are literally a week away from Thanksgiving Eve and the NBC special Countdown to Thanksgiving, which is going to air a week from tonight on NBC to get everybody ready for the parade the next day, which is a week from tomorrow. Um, but be that as it may, like I said, it's the 19th of November, 2025. It is a Wednesday, and it is about 4 p.m. in the afternoon. The sun already is setting itself to go down and everything, and it is a crisp 61 degrees. But with that said, I'd like to ask you guys to do me a solid favor before I start here, and that's like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. Also, guys, you can support me, if you will, outside of YouTube by clicking on the links in the description, by clicking on some of the links in the description, as well as even looking up the other platforms as well. Because if you love podcasting, I added a new episode onto my BW Rosasist Discussions podcast. It is an audio version of the discussion I had, the audio video I did on Rue, and what her role might be going into, let's say, the final seasons of both Has Been Hotel and Hell of a Boss. Basically, that's up on my BW Rosas Discussions. That's the newest one I put out there. So if you guys want to check that out, if you will, you guys want to check out my podcast, you can find it at all your favorite podcast outlets like iTunes, iHeart, Pandora, Spotify, Audible, Amazon Music, Radio Public, and to an extent, SiriusXM. Now, if you do like going to other video platforms outside of YouTube, you can find me there as well. You can find me at rumble.com and VENMO.com. Those have identical, if not similar, content to this main YT channel, but also, ladies and gentlemen, also have some content that may not be YouTube friendly, so you can check it out on those platforms, as well as you can find me at Dailymotion and Odyssey. Now, also, outside of that, if you're into art, I'm at two of the artistic places I'm at that I can tell you about. I mean, I am at the other one that for short is known as FA for short. But the main ones I'm at primarily are DeviantArt.com at BVW1979, and at inkbunny.net at BWRoses. You can check me out at those two. You can check me out at those two places if you're into artwork and all that and creativity. Also, I have a Patreon. You want to check me out at patreon.com. Support me there. It'd be greatly appreciated. Also, guys, I have a Venmo and a Cash App if you want to chime in there and help out. That'd be greatly appreciated as well. And also, I have a couple of online stores. I have a Fourth Wall store, if you will. It's been up for about a month and a half now. Got a couple of items there I think you might like. Check that out. Link is at the top. And my OG Teespring store, links are at the bottom for that. There's merchandise there a little bit more than at the Fourth Wall store because that's been around for a couple of years, the OG Teespring store. But yeah, you can the links are at the bottom for that. Find some stuff there for yourself or for family, if you will, in time for this Christmas season. Now, outside of that, ladies and gentlemen, you can also find me on social media at TikTok. You can find me at Blue Sky, and you can find me at Twitter, aka x.com. I've been uploading some stuff over at TikTok lately, some new video stuff. Basically a minute, 3 minutes. In fact, honestly, I just uploaded the how-to video, the how to make the rice, cheese, and hot dog combo lunch, quick lunch, if you will. I just uploaded that to TikTok as well as here onto my YouTube page. So if you like going over to TikTok and watching stuff over there, you can find it there as well. But like I said, you can find me at TikTok, Twitter, and you can find me at Blue Sky. Also, ladies and gentlemen, during this video premiere, the live video premiere, you can chime in the live chat if you'd like, give your thoughts on what I'm going to talk about here. As well as if you also feel like doing so, the SuperChats, will be open. So if you want to chime in, your thoughts as well as donate, help out, with SuperChats, that'd be greatly appreciated. And also during the video premiere and afterwards, the comment section will be open. And if you don't get here in time for the video premiere, but you still want to help donate, the Super Thanks button, the little heart with the $sign, will be up and running after the video premiere is over. But with that said, let's get into the topic at hand. And it's a topic that, as of yesterday, a lot of people are talking about and going over either in a live stream or in a near hour-long video or so. They are just giving their thoughts, and boy, do they give their thoughts on this interview, this second interview that Tony Khan did with Ariel Helwani, and I'll get into that in a moment. I'll be right back. Okay, everybody, so I'm back. I got myself a little OJ, orange juice, if you will, to, wet my whistle, kind of get me pumped and going here. But like I said, this is something that has gotten a lot of people talking. People like Just Alex of Just Alex Central, Alex's World here on YouTube, did a live stream reaction to it, real-time live stream reaction to it. And JD from JD's, Off the Script JD from NY206, he did a video on it. He even talked about it yesterday with Solomonster in the Tuesday Night Titans. I'm sure Solomonster will do his own take on it this Sunday during his podcast. It might be one of the first things, clip-wise, he uploads to his channel before the day is out or at the beginning of next Monday. But with that said, Tony Khan did another interview with Ariel Helwani, and people did look at some of the more interesting aspects of it. Now, I didn't watch the interview yet. I might in time, but from what people have said, it is probably one of the longest interviews. One of the longest interviews that Tony Khan has ever done when it comes to AEW. And a lot of people did get critical about Ariel Helwani because they felt like Ariel Helwani was being a little bit more, I guess you could say, gentle, a little bit more, not so hard-hitting, but basically he was more, he was just more along the lines of, I don't want no trouble, so I'm going to be more, easy. I'm basically going to go more easy on him than before. Like, that's how people perceived it. Like, Ariel basically had this thought process of, I'm going to ask him the questions I need to ask, and I'll be hard at times. I'll be hard on the questions at times, but I'm mostly going to go a little easier on him when it's all, during the whole process, during the whole discussion, the talk, the interview, if you will. But anyway, I was looking up some key points, because obviously people want to know. They want to know exactly, what his thoughts were. That being Tony Khan's thoughts, with Ariel. When it came to a lot of the questions that pretty much they were hoping Ariel would answer, or not answer, but ask. He would ask. And I went to the Sportster. Now, the Sportster is one of those wrestling size combat sports sites that I guess you could say you can take with a grain of salt when it comes to some of their reporting. Sometimes I think they're mostly known to exaggerate, but they're also sometimes more, basically I'm trying to find the right word to say, guys. I do apologize for this, but they're almost like, again, they can exaggerate titles to get attention, but they're also more than willing at times to, take what they're hearing and build upon it and all that. So that's kind of what they are. Like, they'll take a report from Fightful or PW Insider or WrestleVotes, and they'll say, hey, let's run with it, and maybe put our own spin on it, and that's about it. So anyway, this came from the Sportster, and this is the headline was, key takeaways from Tony's, sorry, a little tongue-tied there. This is the headline they put. They said, key takeaways from Tony Khan's tell-all with Ariel Helwani. Now, it's not a tell-all, if you will, obviously, but again, that's them putting their own little twist, own little spin on it to kind of get attention, to get people, to click on their site to see and read about the takeaways, if you know what I mean. But anyway, this is what they put on there, when the people put on there. This is what they say, and I quote. This is from the Sportster. This is what they say, and I quote. In one of his longest and most open interviews about AEW to date, AEW president and head booker Tony Khan sat down with Ariel Helwani on November 18th to settle the differences from an awkward first interview several years ago, and opened the door on several topics like WWE versus AEW, like the WWE versus AEW war, the status of several AEW wrestlers, the CM Punk controversy, and more. Now they go on to also say that there were some notable takeaways from this interview that fans will be more interested in than others, and they deserve some mention. As interesting as Tony's love for Ghostbusters is, we'll be taking a look at some of the bigger headlines that came out of this revealing talk with Ariel Helwani. Now, again, we don't know how much revealing it is, but apparently one of the positive criticisms, if you are in agreement with it, is that, as they put it here, he was more open to answer certain questions, or at least give his side of the story, but also do it in his own typical, as people would look at it, typical Tony Khan TK interview style. You know, where he would say, "Oh, it's great. This is great. Oh, let's talk." Basically, kind of answer things in the way that a lot of people feel would be annoying. Kind of, and not just annoying, but would be basically like, okay, he's answering it, the question, but not straightly answering it, and everything. It's just, he just was, I guess, given, some people say, like JD, when he was talking about it at the beginning of his video, said that he feels that Tony probably got some advice, probably did some practicing with people in AEW, like some legends, veterans, if you will, maybe current talent, on how to do this second interview, how to answer certain questions, if you will, that he felt and they felt may come his way. And now here's the other thing too. Does Tony Khan have the right to maybe request request maybe the questions in advance, or at least some of the questions that Ariel would be consider answering him, asking him upon the interview's airing? Does he have that right? Yeah. So I'm assuming maybe somebody advised him, hey, why don't you ask to see what kind of questions Ariel is going to set up for you, so we can use those questions to so that we, your team, can use those questions. Almost had a brain fart there, guys. I do apologize. We can use those questions to help you practice run, for this interview, so you can be more, less awkward, more open to what, is going to come your way, and maybe even expand on it. So Tony, if that's what happened to make this interview, and some people put it a lot better than the last one, if that's what they did, and Tony said, okay, go ahead, get some of those questions to us so I can practice, then that would explain maybe why he was more, as people say, more open at times, more positively workable with Ariel Helwani on answering some questions. But what did he ask? What questions were asked and everything? Well, of course, the big one was the CM Punk controversy, the footage. The footage of CM Punk and Jack Perry from All In London that they aired basically back in 2024, back in the spring of last year. And, they did put some bullet points, that being the Sportster. They said the 3 bullet points they put were CM Punk was fired after an incident with Jack Perry at All In 2023. The second bullet point was Tony Khan aired footage of the altercation on Dynamite. And 3, they mentioned that this remains one of AEW's most controversial decisions to date. So, of course, that was one of the things people wanted to know about. They wanted to know, why did Tony Khan do this and everything, and does he regret it? Well, this is their answer right here, or this is Tony Khan's answer highlighted by the Sportster. This is what Tony Khan's answer was, in light of being asked that question by Ariel. Now, this is what the Sportster says before we get to Tony's answer. They said, in response to CM Punk's appearance, when speaking to Ariel Helwani, in which he opened the door about what happened at All In 2023 prior to his firing, Tony Khan made the decision to air the footage of the altercation as part of a storyline on AEW Dynamite, which was very divisive amongst fans. When reflecting on that decision, Tony Khan revealed to Ariel that he didn't agree with Punk's version of events. So he felt it made sense to air the footage. Khan stated it. Khan stated. Let me read this because the wording's a little off. They said that Khan stated that it delivered a strong number on TV, justifying the call to put it on Dynamite. Now here's Tony Khan's answer. They did put this in bold italic, if you will, bold italic. This is what Tony Khan said. This was his answer. He said, "It's a TV show, and it did a very strong number. For many reasons, I think it made sense, and it was a thing that was advertised, and it got a lot of attention, and it did a very strong number. It's in the eye of the beholder." Now, here's the thing. Is that answer kind of sensible? Is that kind of like the right answer that Tony needed to probably give? Some would say yes. Some would actually say yes. Because what Tony Khan is saying is, when he says at the end of that it's in the eye of the beholder, what he's saying is it's up to you, it's up to me, it's up to anybody to interpret it, in a way that we feel, we feel and believe was the real reason, behind its airing. Tony, his answer was, hey, I advertised it was going to happen. I advertised it because I didn't agree with what, Punk said here on your show, Ariel. So I decided to show my side of events with the actual footage. And at the end of the day, it's a TV show, and it did a strong number for us, not only because, of, the name, the name attached to it, but also due to the fact that it was advertised that we were going to show it, and we did. Now, again, when he says at the end of that it's in the eye of the beholder, he is right. It's up to how you and I kind of, interpretate it and everything. It's up to you and I on how we interpreted it, and so on. But, again, it's still one of those situations that, as they put it here, is still pretty much looked at by a lot of folks that are still part of AEW, were part of AEW, that cover AEW, cover all of wrestling and combat sports. It's still looked at as one of the more divisive, controversial decisions that Tony made, and all because, as he puts it, Tony Khan puts it, hey, I didn't agree with what Punk said here. I didn't agree with his side of the story. So I want to show you exactly visually what happened, and that's what he did. He basically decided in front of the world, hey, I'm going to show you exactly what happened. So that's what he did. And okay, I want to make sure I don't miss anything here. Now, moving forward, another headline that they highlighted is WWE did not ask AEW to use Adam Copeland / Edge for John Cena's retirement tour. Now, here's the bullet points here. They have 3 bullet points here. The first bullet point is fans online spoke a lot about Edge returning to WWE to face John Cena. Second bullet point, Adam Copeland's AEW absence coincided with Cena's final months in WWE. Number 3, Tony Khan gave a resolute no when asked. So he basically gave a resolute of no, they didn't ask, us. That's what he said. That's what he said. But here's what they point out. They said basically that there was plenty of talk. This is from the Sportster, in this one headline they looked at from the interview. This is what they said, and I quote. There was plenty of talk over the last several months when it came to John Cena's final opponents before retiring, and one of the names that was thrown around a lot was Adam Copeland, formerly Edge, due to him being one of Cena's greatest rivals. Helwani asked whether WWE had asked to use Copeland, to which Khan said no. Khan did state that Tony Khan did state that if WWE were to extend Cena's retirement date after this year, then it would be a, quote, never say never situation to the world of professional wrestling, or due to the world of professional wrestling. Now, obviously, you could look at that. I haven't seen all of JD's response to this. His response that he uploaded today. Nor did I see or tune into just Alex's live stream reaction. But I can guarantee you, and I know Solomonster might even, chime in on this on Sunday if he didn't do so yesterday, and he might expand on it on Sunday. But a lot of them are going to pretty much say, that Tony coming out and saying, no, WWE didn't ask us and everything, and hey, if they would extend it till next year, it's never say never due to professional wrestling. I guarantee you a lot of them are going to look at that BS answer, as I'm sure they're going to be, interpreting it, and they're going to say, they're going to basically give you their side of how they see it, and that the way they see it is Tony Khan's not going to, flat out say the truth. And the truth in their mind is that Adam Copeland may have gone to Tony Khan to say, hey, I want to take part of this, and Tony Khan probably turned him down, and Adam Copeland decided, okay, I'm just going to be off TV for the rest of the year until his retirement's over, then I'll come back. That's how people might interpret it. That's how I interpret it. That if this is the answer Tony's giving, like, oh, WWE didn't ask us, but hey, if they extended it to next year, hey, you never know. You never know. Stranger things have happened. I look at that, or I read that, and not only do I believe Tony would answer in that manner, not only do I believe Tony would answer in that manner, and everything, not only would I believe, that Tony would, answer in that manner. I'm just watching some, young kittens running around. Some kids are running around. They're chasing the cats, or it looks like they're chasing the cats. But anyway, not only do I believe Tony would give that kind of answer, but I am in agreement that I don't think it's the full truth. I think the full truth is what I feel everybody else, even though I haven't heard what they've said yet, is probably going to give an answer to. And that is the fact that Tony Khan, prohibited Adam from wanting to take part in it, and Adam probably said, okay, no problem. So, he probably said, you know what, you don't want me to be part of it? That's cool, I have no problem with it. I'll just take the rest of the year off till his retirement's over, and he's hung it up. Then I'll come back, I'll pop back up on AEW television. And that's probably what's going to happen. That's probably what's going to happen is he's going to wait until at least World's End, maybe Full Gear this Saturday, but mostly World's End, to pop back up, because that'll be plenty of time after John has retired and hung up those boots and those jorts, if you will, and moved on. So I think that's probably when we'll see Edge, is right after the retirement for John is done, so that way there is no temptation to want to, once again ask Tony, hey, I want to take part in this, I want to be part of this, let me be there. So yeah, I think that's why Adam is off TV. It's not just because he's filming the Viking show, and everything, which he is, but he's also off TV because I think Tony Khan didn't allow him to, almost had a brain fart there, didn't allow him to, go out and be part of this, last time is now tournament, or at least, put his name into the hat, get in contact with Levesque and Nick Khan and John and say, hey, I want in. I want in. Tell me what I can do to get in. Because even though I'm here, let me know what I can do to get in. So I think maybe that's what happened. Adam probably wanted to do it. Tony Khan said no. And Tony Khan's making up the excuse that WWE never contacted them. Now, I've got a feeling you're going to get some inside people at WWE counter answering that by saying that's not true because they never contacted us. They never contacted us at all on Edge's behalf, on Adam Copeland's behalf, to see if, he could be part of this. Because we probably would have said, yes, bring him in, bring him back in. We want him to be part of this. Honestly, I just really don't really believe that answer. Now, could there be truth to it? Maybe. Again, as he said at the end of that one question that was asked to him about CM Punk, it's in the eye of the beholder. So whether you believe it or not, it's up to you. Some would probably agree with it, and some won't. And I think a lot of people don't. Honestly, I think a lot of people don't. They don't believe it and all that. So that's pretty much up to interpretation. One of those things up to interpretation. Now, I don't see anything else that's on here that was mentioned, because one of the things he did mention about, or he did talk about, was the situation with Warner Brothers and everything, and the future there and everything, depending on like who's going to buy them, whether it's Paramount, who now has some Saudi deals going on with them to make it happen, or it's Comcast Universal with their Saudi partners, or Saudi Arabia outright. You know, Tony Khan basically stated in the interview that whoever gets the WBD would inherit the contracts, the contractual broadcasting rights for AEW. So in other words, Tony Khan's saying that whoever buys WBD, and by extension, TBS and TNT, which Dynamite and Collision air on, that basically they'd also be inheriting the contractual agreement between WBD and AEW, and thus they'd be inheriting AEW's deal to be kept on to at least 2027, 2028 at the latest. And there's a lot of people that they read that, they heard that, they saw that clip, or they went back and watched that portion of the interview, when they watched it live or took time watching it. And a lot of people, in fact, JD even said it himself. This is one part of JD's video I saw. JD basically said that the Saudis don't even probably know what AEW is. They probably don't even have a clue of what All Elite Wrestling is, if you know what I mean. Like, basically to them, AEW could be, an acronym for a secret recipe of, holiday dessert, for all they know, stuff like that. So basically, JD, is one of those people that looked at it like, yeah, the Saudis probably wouldn't care about AEW at all, and even if they were the ones to buy it outright, they probably wouldn't even know what to do with it, And then, of course, you have the whole situation with Paramount looking at potentially buying it, with their help, putting in now a $71 billion bid, or I think it's $71 billion bid and everything. So it will be kind of interesting to see, exactly, what they do, to see exactly what that, future is going to hold for AEW. But Tony basically feels like, Tony basically feels like, there's not going to be an issue. The way Tony's making it sound, and one thing we do have to say about Tony, one thing we do have to say about Tony, whether we like the guy or not, and we feel he might have taken on more than he can handle, and he needs to stop being a fan and be more of a boss, is he's too nice of a guy. He's too nice of a guy, and basically being too nice of a guy, it's causing him to really not, it's causing him not to really be able to focus on making the product as good as it should be. So yeah, he's too nice of a guy. He's too positive a guy, which is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing to be positive. But in this day and age of this business, you do need to be more realistic. You do have to pay attention to changes that are happening. And I think Tony Khan needs to pay attention to this WBD situation, because even if it's Paramount or Universal that gets the controlling situation, of WBD, and the Saudis are just backing it up with the money, taking on the debt, and all that, so on and so forth, and whatever, and everything, basically, hold on, guys, I'm getting a little distracted here. I get a little tongue-tied. Okay, guys, sorry, I was getting a little distracted. I saw a cat going to our neighbor's truck, and yeah, they're moving. Just making sure the cat's moving and everything. But anyway, to get back on what I'm saying, that Tony Khan, he's just, again, there's nothing wrong with being positive and all that, but it's like Tony Khan needs to be more realistic in this day and age with this kind of a business, because he may not think anything bad's going to happen, but if it's Paramount with the help of the Saudis, or it's Universal with the help of the Saudis, both have ties with WWE and TKO. And by having those ties, that could mean trouble for AEW. If AEW basically wants to stay afloat, they're going to have to change. Tony Khan's going to have to change, for the better. But, again, as I was saying before, I got a little tongue-tied and distracted there, because, again, I saw a neighbor's cat go into the vehicle, so they had to chase it out and everything, honking the horn. And I said, also had to get something to drink. I was getting tongue tied. Again, Tony needs to pay attention to this because this could vastly affect AEW in the future. And by vastly affecting it, it could basically cut off, as a lot of people say, the share market of where they can go, to showcase their product on a national level, in the future, in the near future. Basically, he feels very positive and everything that AEW is going to be fine going forward, no matter who ends up buying WBD. Now, with that said, he also was asked about talents taking certain risks, high spots and everything, ideas, and he did acknowledge that the Darby Allin glass spot off the ladder last year during Sting's retirement match, at Revolution, was it last year or this year? Was it last year or this year? I got to go back and look. But anyway, they did acknowledge, that basically, or Tony, I should say, did acknowledge that was taking a step too far. Like, he's all right with everything else, apparently, but the glass spot off the ladder was taking it too far. Was taking it too far. And basically, he did acknowledge that he does let his talent do what they want to do, in a sense. Like, he basically says he'll talk things over and he'll just let them go out, do what they got to do, to put on the show. At least that's the answer, as I interpreted it, that he gave. And a lot of people look at that, answer, or at least the answer he gave in his way during the interview. They look at that and they're like, why would you say that? Why would you say that you allow your talent to do whatever they want? You're basically admitting, excuse me, that you're allowing them to walk all over you, and be able to get away with pretty much murder, if you will. And here's the thing, Tony obviously feels that, hey, if we're going to give the fans, what we advertised and everything, then we're going to give them what we advertise. We're going to let the talent, do what they've been wanting to do. We're going to let them cut loose. So I think that's what he was saying. When basically saying he lets the talent do what they want to do, he's saying, hey, I'm going to let them, cut loose like they've been wanting to for a while, and give us, something that, will get people talking. So that's one thing that he talked about. That's one thing he talked about. Now, among other things, he did, he did talk about Britt Baker. He did talk about Britt Baker and everything. And basically, this is what the Sportster put, in the headlines about Britt Baker could return to AEW very soon. This is the bullet points. They said, Tony Khan was coy on the likes of Jericho and Andrade. The second bullet point is, when it came to Britt Baker, Khan was more open. And the third bullet point was, Baker hasn't been on AEW programming for a year. So, those are the bullet points. Now, this is what they take away from the interview. They said, Britt Baker last wrestled in AEW in November last year following months of being embroiled in various controversies, injuries, and more. Despite some reports of WWE being interested, Tony Khan revealed to Ariel Helwani that he expects Baker to be back in AEW at some point, singing her praises as a person and a performer. Contrary to Khan's comments on Chris Jericho and Andrade, which were vague, he seemed way more confident. Let me put it that way. He seemed way more confident in talking about the AEW future of Britt Baker. So it is safe to assume she could be back in action in the near future. Now, here's the thing. He says that now. But is there any real truth to it? Because Britt, if you look at her social media, has taken any acknowledgement of All Elite Wrestling AEW as far as last time we all checked, has taken all that acknowledgement and connection to AEW off her social media. Now, she could have put it back on. Grant you, I will grant you that. But last time we heard and saw, she took it down. basically stating in a way she didn't want nothing to do with the company anymore or be associated. So, so that's something to, really think about, because if he's singing her praises, as a person and a performer, then you would expect that, hey, maybe that means she will be back, and she'll be back where she should have been, in the first place, and never been, removed from. But we don't know. We don't know. Now, people, I'm sure, upon hearing this, are thinking, oh, we know what's going to happen. We know what's going to happen. And if you're wondering what I feel people are assuming, upon hearing this, is they're assuming after Full Gear, when Mercedes wins number 14, because that's how a lot of people are perceiving it, she's going to win number 14, that being the AEW World title, that's when the lights are going to go out, and then we're going to hear some music, and then all of a sudden we'll hear DMD. And then out comes Britt, and then off to the races we go for World's End, and then maybe Revolution at the start of 2026. That's how a lot of people are going to perceive TK's answer about, hey, I'm praising Britt, him praising Britt as a person and a performer, and her being back. That's the one thing a lot of people are looking at, as a positive out of that response. But as far as Chris Jericho and Andrade goes, he was very vague on it. Like with Andrade, he is willing to bring him back when he's available. Like, hey, when he gets out of this situation he's in right now, he's going to be more than willing to welcome him back with open arms. Which I wouldn't doubt. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see what happens. And Chris Jericho, well, very vague on that. I think he was about to leave after, being asked that question, because he didn't want to give a straight answer. But it does look like, that response of, getting ready to go and all that, I guess to get to the arena to build to Dynamite, to have Dynamite build towards Full Gear this Saturday, excuse me. He's basically, trying to avoid the question, because obviously the question would be, or not the question, but the answer would be, I don't know what's going on with Chris, or something like that. But anyway, it's going to be interesting to see how people respond to the Britt Baker answer, or his answer to Britt Baker. Now, they did talk about WWE and TNA's partnership, and Tony Khan feels and believes that WWE is working with TNA to hurt AEW, because recently Ariel Helwani this past year had Matt and Jeff on there, and Matt believed basically the same thing, that the partnership was to hurt TNA. Now, the bullet points the sports to put out here is WWE and TNA formed a working relationship in 2025, which is true. Second bullet point, Tony Khan agrees with Matt Hardy's verdict that the partnership is to hurt AEW. And in the third bullet point, Khan said he doesn't take this personally. That third bullet point of an answer he gave of, oh, I don't take it personally and all that. Yeah, people will be calling BS on that, because we think he does. We think he does take it personally. He's just not going to show it. Now, this is what they said in the highlights, that being the Sportster. They said, and I quote, Tony Khan was asked about the WWE TNA working relationship, especially since AEW alumni Matt Hardy noted that he felt that the partnership was put together in order to hurt AEW, as a challenger brand. Khan agreed on this front, but noted it wasn't something that was unheard of from WWE. For instance, he spoke about WWE's deal with Smoky Mountain Wrestling in the past during the Wrestling War of WCW, with him seeing it as no different from WWE's usual playbook. And this is Tony Khan's answer. Get this. He says, it's a very interesting collaboration. Matt hit the nail on the head, and it makes sense. AEW is a very strong challenger brand. It's not that unusual. Okay, so let's go over something here, right? Tony Khan, let's go over something, man. And I'm sure a lot of people brought this up too. Probably even got a chuckle out of it, alright? But let's go over something, man. Okay? Let's go over something. You bring up Smoky Mountain Wrestling, right? SMW. Jim Cornette's old promotion, right? You bring up that. You know what, Tony? If you wanted to really use a brand, a promotion as a good example of WWE doing what they're doing with TNA and doing something similar back in the day during the Monday Night Wars and the the confrontation with WCW. If you really wanted to use a promotion as a good example, you should have mentioned the OGECW. Yeah, you should have mentioned the OGECW. You know why? Because that was still its own separate entity. That was still its own separate entity. But WWE saw it as a potential partner to hurt WCW and as an access point to get first dibs on some potential talent. That's what the relationship was. That's what it was. But here's the difference, though. Here's the difference. Whether you believe it or you don't. Here's the difference. ECW wasn't always dependent on talent crossing over from WWE or the NXT brand and vice versa. It was a financial collaboration when needed. And mostly, ECW was able to take pot shots, legitimately shoot pot shots, if you will, at WWE. Along with doing the same to WCW. But they were able to still do that. Is TNA doing that? No. Talent legitimately and maybe storyline-wise online may make it, known that they're not too fond of some of the favoritism that the NXT stars get over them, and and the same goes with the NXT stars with TNA, vice versa kind of deal. But but the situation is very clear. It's very clear, and different. ECW still was its own thing. They only relied on WWE when the financial situation called for it. That's it. And they were an instant access, they were an instant access pipeline to certain talent that Vince wanted. They were. They were a direct pipeline to certain talent Vince wanted. And obviously we saw that. He wanted the Dudleys. He got the Dudleys. He wanted Taz. He got Taz. So on and so forth. Would he have gotten the Sandman and Raven if they were still, if they had not been in WCW, at that time and not come back to ECW around the same time? Had he, would he have gotten, his hands on Sandman before he left with WCW? If he could, absolutely. Absolutely he would have, but he didn't. But I can tell you honestly, my opinion, honestly as a fan, Vince probably didn't want to deal with any kind of controversy, drug issues, or maybe he just felt like, hey, if I bring Sandman in, he's going to probably outshine Stone Cold because they were building up Stone Cold. So that's just my opinion, though. That's just my opinion. But what I'm getting at, though, is the difference with Smoky Mountain. The difference with Smoky Mountain is Smoky Mountain served, Smoky Mountain served basically as the same way USWA served. USWA and Smoky Mountain served as developmental before there was developmental. That's what they served. They served as developmental before developmental. That's why and here's the other thing too. What Tony's missing out on is Smoky Mountain didn't just partner with WWE to provide talent back and forth, in an exchange kind of way, but also a developmental kind of way. They also exchanged talent earlier in the year with WCW. That's right. Within the span of 1 year in 1993, Smoky Mountain had the big highlighted feud of the Rock and Roll Express and the Heavenly Bodies compete on two different major promotional pay-per-views. The first one in February of that year at Super Brawl for WCW. The second one in the later portion of that year for the SMW Smoky Mountain Wrestling Tag Team titles at Survivor Series. And yes, both times Smoky Mountain got a major platform to show, to be showcased on and all that. But at the end of the day, they will utilize the same way United States Wrestling Association, USWA, later known as PPW, Power Pro Wrestling, was used. And that was as developmental before developmental. There is a difference, Tony. There is a difference. ECW was more of an actual major brand, competition, competitor, challenger to WWE and WCW than SMW was. Okay? They were more legit. The only reason WWE helped them is because Vince saw the potential of what he could have access to in the future. And yes, it was the same reason that they're doing what they're doing now with TNA. That was to hurt World Championship Wrestling. So basically, Tony, you should have used a better example instead of Smoky Mountain. Because Smoky Mountain, I guarantee you, Jim Cornette may have liked the shout out, but even he would tell you, yeah, you should have used ECW as a better example. So, yeah, I just had to bring that up because I know others will bring it up. Okay, so here's the other one. It says, Tony Khan isn't threatened by WWE's counter-programming efforts. The bullet points here are, Tony Khan believes WWE counter-programming is purposeful, so he does acknowledge they're doing it on purpose. He did reveal, second bullet point, that AEW has not suffered in any way from WWE's decisions. This is true, because obviously they're realizing that if we go head-to-head with them, we're going to get screwed, so let's move it. Let's move up a few hours. And then number 3, All in Texas aired during the afternoon and was one of the biggest days ever, which is true. That is very, very true. Now, continuing on, this is what the Sportster says, and I quote, WWE has counter-programmed AEW numerous times in 2025, stacking AEW pay-per-views weekends with multiple shows, scheduling events at the same time, and targeting similar locations around the same time too. However, Tony Khan is not perturbed by this, revealing that these sort of tactics are expected in the wrestling business. Additionally, Tony explained that AEW's business has not been impacted at all by the counter-programming measures, and in fact explained that AEW's audience as a percentage of WWE's is one of its strongest points ever. And this is from Tony's words. This is Tony talking during the interview, and he says, and I quote, "It has never been a thing where it costs us anything, and when you do something like AEW All in Texas, where we do the show in the afternoon, it really worked out for us great, and it was one of the biggest days in company history." That is true. That is true. They ended up basically, having a good show, having a decent-sized audience, and all that. But the problem, if you will, was they had to move it originally from its original time slot because they had it in the afternoon. They were scheduling it for the afternoon and everything. Oh, not the afternoon, but for the evening. They had to move it to the afternoon. Sorry if I kind of messed that up. I'm kind of closing up the blinds right now because it's getting dark and it's getting colder as we get into the more evening hours or very late dark night afternoon hours. But basically he's not wrong in it being a big show for them, one of the biggest days, because again they had to move. Originally they were going to be in the evening, but because WWE had their show coming out, they're like, yeah, we're going to avoid that, and we're going to put our show earlier in the afternoon. Thus, we won't be affected. And it worked out for them. It did work out for them. So, in the end, he's not wrong in that measure. But here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. He did it again with, All Out in Toronto. He did it with the, same thing with All Out in Toronto. But the issue was that was already pretty much advertised to be an evening show. Clearing the day for a lot of people to go out and do their stuff. But now you have to move it to the afternoon, because of WWE doing the same thing again. So, and that basically at the end of the day was, looked at as a good thing, but it also kind of, I guess you could say screwed people over with the scheduling of what they were going to do. And all that, like weddings, birthdays, whatever. You get the idea. Family gatherings. But yeah, Tony basically, just acknowledged that, hey, I have no problem with it. It's we actually did very well with the changing of the time. So he looked at the positive. And again, the one thing about him, people may not like is he is a positive guy. But like I said, in the industries he's in, he's got to be more realistic than positive. Now, another highlight they talked about, or they focused on from the interview, is Adam Cole, and that how Adam Cole may never wrestle again. Key points here. They said Adam Cole relinquished the TNT title at All In. Cole has a history of concussion injuries. Tony Khan was emotional when speaking about Cole. And that's another thing he is too. He is emotional. We'll give him that. And that sometimes is looked at as a good thing and maybe not so. But here's what they mentioned from the interview. They said Adam Cole was one of the many names put forward to Tony Khan in this interview, and it was one that Tony found difficult to discuss. He didn't seem too confident about the prospect of Cole wrestling again, but wanted him to always be part of the AEW family in some sort of role in any sort of role, he could do. And then I do mention that Cole was talked out of retiring at All In 2025 ahead of vacating the TNT title, but he revealed to the fans that he didn't know if he'd be able to step back foot in the ring again. So yeah, basically not a basically not a good last headline that they should end with and all that. Now, again, they did talk about some other stuff as well, and like I said, when it comes to some of the other stuff here, in fact, I'm trying to find more information on it because I don't want to have to go and watch the whole dang thing. Um, let's see. Let's go. I know it's here somewhere. Here we go. Now, they do talk about, like I said, they did talk about Andrade, and I mentioned this earlier, so I'm going to get a more clearer example here. This is what they said. This is from the Rhetoric AEW official, or the Reddit AEW official. They said Tony Khan speaks about Andrade, and this is Tony Khan. He says, anytime he's free and whenever that is, he's absolutely always welcome in AEW. Now that was the Fightful article from 2025 or 18th. It said Fightful has a transcript. I didn't even know that. So yeah, I'm gonna look into that. It might help out a little bit, guys. Hold on for a second, guys. Hold on. Okay, guys. So I found some of what Fightful has. So Fightful separated in separate articles, but basically they go more into depth with they went more into depth as to what the interview was about. But this is what Fightful says. It said, in April of 2024, CM Punk joined the Ariel Helwani show to give his side of what happened between him and AEW after All In 2023. Among other things, Punk criticized the company for how it was run and criticized Tony Khan as a boss. Appearing on the Ariel Helwani show, Tony was asked about the fallout with Punk. Now, this is Tony Khan talking, here, and this is what he says, and I quote. So I want to get more in depth here. So this is going to go a lot longer than I thought, but that's cool. It's one of those situations to where it's one of those situations to where you want something to go longer, and this is a good reason for it. So anyway, and if you hear anything, guys, I'm shutting the windows and all that because, like I said, it's getting dark. So yeah, hold on for a sec while I do that. Okay. So this is what Tony Khan said, more in detail, if you will, as to his response to CM Punk, if you will. This is what Tony Khan said. Hold on, I'm still turning on the lights and everything here. I do apologize. But this is what he says. He says, and I quote: "If you look at the time before Field came to AEW, we had a great run, and we were having great times together. We were having a great year. We're having a great year right now with the roster, and this is the best roster in the best AEW locker room. It feels like in and out of the ring. The combination. This is the best we've been. We also had great times together. It was clear when we started doing Collision. I wanted to reconcile and find a way to do. I wanted to reconcile and find a way to do those things. I guess that wasn't possible. I didn't necessarily agree with everything he said." That's Tony Khan. Now, he did. Now they do mention that Punk noted that he thought people walked all over Khan and that Khan didn't stand up for himself. This is Tony Khan responding to that criticism because a lot of people feel the same way even to this day. You know, a lot of people feel the same way even to this day about, you know, Tony Khan, you know, just allowing people, you know, to, you know, push him around. This is what he says, and I quote, let me get my tablet up here for a second. This is what he says, and I quote. He says, "I don't agree with that, but everybody is entitled to an opinion. That's what feedback. That's feedback and fair if that's how he feels. I didn't agree with the description of the way things played out, and that's okay. That's all in the eye of the beholder, just like the whole situation. AEW is doing really well right now, and I'm really happy with what the people on the shows are doing, and it wasn't the first time he and I disagreed. And it may not be the last, and that's okay. I tried to reconcile, and I wanted to find a way for everybody to work together. It didn't work, and that's okay. It seems like everybody is happier and doing better right now. In AEW, everyone is really happy, and this is the best the locker room has ever been since the Jacksonville lockdown days." Okay, so again, you're probably hearing that, and you're like, how many times is he going to say that? Oh, locker room's great. It's okay. It's cool. Great. Okay. Cool. Great. You know what? Like, how many times is he going to say that? And that would be a good question to ask. Well, again, that's just Tony. You know, that's just Tony Khan being the positive guy he is. And again, like I said, in this day and age, you know, especially with the business they're in, you know, they can't be that positive. They can't be, so enlightening to the situation, if you know what I mean. But anyway, moving on, as I go back a page here. Now let's see where we're at. See where we're at here. Hold on, guys. Let's see. Okay. Now we're gonna go into more detail about the Adam Copeland thing here. Go into more detail here. Let me bring that up. Hopefully, let me bring that up. If it'll let me. One thing about tablets is they're very finicky with your fingers. You know what I'm saying? Okay, here we go. Here we go. So, again, Tony Khan, Fightful puts it in the headline, Tony Khan did not contact them regarding Adam Copeland Edge being part of John Cena's retirement tour. Now, moving here, let me get this right. They said, this is Fightful, they said, one of John Cena's biggest rivals throughout his career was Adam Copeland, Edge. The two were forever tied after Copeland cashed in his Money in the Bank briefcase to win the title at New Year's Revolution 2006. Copeland is signed to AEW, but fans thought he might be part of Cena's retirement tour in some capacity in 2026. Or at least 2025, they should say. Appearing on the Ariel Helwani show, Tony Khan was asked if WWE ever reached out to AEW regarding Copeland. This was Tony's response. He says, "No. Adam is going to be with us through the end of the year. He's a huge part of AEW, and I have so much respect for him, and I really like Adam a lot. I'm glad to have him here. He's away filming, but he's with us, and he's going to stay with us." They did say that Copeland said after AEW All Out in September that he would be stepping away to be with his family. Cena paid tribute to Copeland during his match with Sami Zayn hitting a spear. Fans can find Copeland's thoughts on the spear here. So, yeah, basically that's a little bit more different than what Sportster put out, but basically Tony's saying no, and basically the way Fightful, because I'm more reliable in transcripting in all time, basically the way Tony's making it sound right there, according to Fightful, is, yeah, even if they would have contacted us, we would have said no. That's why when I mentioned earlier, nobody would have believed that for a minute, that, you know, Tony saying, "Oh, you never know in 2026. You know, if they extend it to then, you never know." You know, him answering here, this being directly from the interview, this transcript, that kind of tells you right there that Tony wouldn't have even thought about it, and that's why I think Adam took the time off, not because not because of the fact that he wants to be with his family. That's a good thing, and not only because he's filming Vikings, that's a good thing. But also for the fact that he probably didn't like the fact that Tony said, "No, I'm not going to let you do that. You are AEW, you're all the way, so no, you're not going to be part of something that, even though you were a huge part of his career, even though you're a huge part of his career, and everything, and it would be great if it would be, justifiable for you to be part of it. No, I'm not going to let you do that and let WWE, have the final say. I'm not going to let that happen. I'm not going to let them make us look like fools. So yeah, basically that sounds more like Tony Khan basically saying, yeah, that's not going to happen, kind of deal, dude. Anyway, continuing on. Let me see if I find more here. Okay, here we go. Back onto the CM Punk Jack Perry tape and everything, or the footage. More detailed by Fightful. It says here in the headline, Tony Khan says the CM Punk Jack Perry tape footage spoke for itself, and he didn't agree with Punk's description of what happened. Okay, as I try to get this advertisement off here. It says here in the headline, it says, in April 2024, CM Punk spoke with Ariel Helwani and recounted the backstage incident between him and Jack Perry at All In 2023. Punk said he choked Perry a little and then yelled over at Tony Khan saying he quit. AEW would air the backstage footage of what happened with Punk and Perry on an episode of Dynamite. Speaking to Ariel Helwani, Tony Khan explained why the decision was made to air the footage. This is a more detailed of Tony's answer, more detailed version of Tony's answer, and I quote, this is from Tony Khan. He says, I do think that I didn't necessarily agree with the description of how it happened. It's a TV show, and it did a very strong number. For many reasons, I think it made sense. And it was a thing that was advertised, and it got a lot of attention, and it did a very strong number. It is in the eye of the beholder. I think the tape spoke for itself, and I didn't agree with how it happened. It was a major part of why I think he was no longer able to continue with us. Even though I would have liked to be able to, and it's clear that I wanted to reconcile and do those things. Now they do describe that Punk was fired from AEW 1 week later, after All In 2023. They said elsewhere during the interview, Khan responded to other criticisms that Punk had following his AEW departure. You can find his full comment here. And we're going to go to that right now. And let's read that. It says, in April of 2024, CM Punk joined the Ariel Helwani show to give his side of what happened between him and AEW after All In 2023. It says, among the things, AEW criticized the company for how it was run and criticized Tony Khan as a boss. Oh, okay, I already read that. Alright, I already read that and everything, so... Yeah, I already read that. Okay, so I already read that part. So let's move forward here. Yeah, that advertisement there. Hold on. Okay. Now, let's see what else we have here. Okay. Let me get rid of the advertisement. One thing about these things, they always have advertisements and all that, so... no, that's not it. Oh, come on. Here we go, got it. Alright, Tony Khan on WWE TNA partnership. This is what Tony Khan said. He says it's not unusual for WWE to collaborate when there is a strong challenger brand like AEW. Which, is true. That is true. And everything. That is true. Hold on. I'm trying to get out of these advertisements here. They say here that Tony Khan comments on the partnership between AEW and TNA. In July, Matt Hardy commented that he believed WWE was working with TNA Wrestling in part due to AEW and its existence. WWE and TNA formed a working partnership in January, with TNA talent appearing on NXT and vice versa. AEW President Tony Khan spoke with Ariel Helwani and was asked about Hardy's comments. This is Tony Khan's response. He says, I really like Matt and Jeff a lot. I loved working with them in AEW, and I still love them very much. I respect their opinion a lot, and I think it's probably true. The fact that Matt said it that's really cool. And then when he was asked about the partnership between WWE and TNA, Tony's reply was, it's a very interesting collaboration. Matt hit the nail on the head, and it makes sense. AEW is a very strong challenger brand. It's not that unusual. Ariel asked him if Tony took the partnership as a compliment. Tony said, absolutely. I remember when WCW was starting to do better and Smoky Mountain was running Georgia, Vince called Jim Cornette and sent a bunch of WWE wrestlers to Smoky Mountain. I do think when you have a strong challenger brand, it's not unusual to see the WWF WWE collaborate with another company. I don't, this is what he says, I don't take it personally. It makes sense. Looking at the wrestling playbook looking at the wrestling playbook for the WWF. Now, Fightful does mention that NXT talent has regularly appeared on TNA programming throughout the year and has held TNA championships. Okay, so moving on from that, because they were going to get into the Edge thing again. So now we get to this right here. World title. They took a photo with Undisputed Champion Cody Rhodes and NXT Champion Ricky Saints. All four were formerly with AEW but left for the respective reasons over the years. Appearing on the Ariel Helwani show, Tony Khan was asked about what he thought of the photo. This is Tony's response. He says, I saw that and I think AEW is having a great year and is in a fantastic place. The roster right now is delivering great shows and I'm proud of what the roster is doing right now. It did make me smile because it reminded me of Double or Nothing 2020, the first pandemic pay-per-view. Cody won the TNT title, Mox retained the AEW World title against the late great Brody Lee. After the show, Cody and Mox took a photo. I thought it was interesting and it shows how far in the mirror. I remember the photo Cody and Mox took. I think I took it. He goes on to say, I have a relationship with all four of them, and they're very different. I could talk for 2 hours about each of the four of them and why I like them, and why I thought they were great in AEW, their matches, and how much I like them. I like them all as people. Then they're all not wrestling in AEW anymore. It just reminded me of the photo in Jacksonville, taking that photo and how it's crazy how 5.5 years have flown by. It says Cody and Moxley, who had left WWF on their own before joining AEW, infamous took a photo flipping off the camera. So I'm not going to show that photo because I might get in trouble, but anyway, yeah, he was. I guess that's a good thing to hear. That it reminded him of the good old days. But you can't. But what's going to get him on, or what's going to get him kind of put into a situation of criticism is talking about how great the roster is before getting to that point. Now, moving on. And let me move about so I can make sure the lights are going on here because it's getting dark. I do apologize for that. Okay. Going on to the next topic here. It states, Tony Khan not sure if AEW will pivot from current pay-per-view price model. Touts strong media rights deal with Warner Bros. Discovery. Okay, so this is what I talked about earlier without having any true context and anything, just going off of what I heard. This is what was said. Tony Khan comments on AEW pay-per-view model. Earlier this year, AEW began airing pay-per-view events on HBO Max at a discounted price of $39.99. The move was a disappointment to some fans who expected the shows to be free of charge on the Warner Brothers-led subscription service. Speaking with Ariel Helwani for a new interview, Khan was asked about the company's current model and if they'll ever include their events for free as a benefit of the service subscription cost. This is Tony's response, and he says, I'm not sure. It's a good question. I think with AEW something I've really. Okay, let me reread that. He says, I'm not sure. It's a good question. I think with AEW something that I've been really conscious of and tried to stay consistent with is maintaining great prices for families or friends to come and watch the shows at an affordable price. The pay-per-view price for AEW has been consistent since day one. It's the same price it's always been to order the pay-per-views. Now, Fightful mentions that after talking about how he tries to load up every pay-per-view to provide value to the fans, Khan said that the company's current media rights agreement is a really strong deal. This is what Tony Khan says. He says, I think we have a great model and we just signed a great media rights deal that I think even the most stingiest analysts would say is a really strong deal for AEW. It makes a lot of sense for us and also shows the faith that Warner Brothers, TBS, TNT, HBO Max have in AEW. Okay, so there's that. So that's that part right there. But again, he has to, as I mentioned earlier, he has to be more aware about what's going on. He has to be more aware of, this whole deal and who's going to end up buying WBD, with or without the help of the Saudi, with or without the help of the Saudis. All right. Continuing on, and boy, there's a lot here. There's a lot here and everything. Continuing on, they actually continue with. They actually follow up on the WBD sale. Tony Khan on possible WBD sale. He says, no matter what happens, I think we will be really important. We will be a really important part of that family. Okay. So Tony Khan comments on a possible WBD sale. The possible sale of Warner Bros. Discovery has been a popular topic of conversation as of late, with various outlets saying that Comcast, Paramount, Skydance, and Netflix are in line to make bids to purchase the company, and the first round bids are due at the end of this week, or actually due tomorrow. They're actually due tomorrow, believe it or not. Speaking with Ariel Helwani for the interview, Khan was asked about the discussion surrounding the company's potential sale. This is what Tony Khan said. And I quote, I feel really great about AEW's relationship with Warner Bros. Discovery. I think it's a great situation where we're one of those strong franchises on multiple channels and properties where AEW is very strongly figured in. Khan continued on and said that he feels confident in AEW remaining as an important part of the WBD family. We're becoming a bigger and bigger part as we grow. Now it's been 6 years of AEW, we continue to become a bigger part of the Warner Brothers family. So I feel like no matter what happens in the future, I think we will be a really important part of that family. But again, he has to pay attention. He has to pay attention and everything. Now, I already talked about the counter programming and everything, so I already talked about that and all that. Make sure. Okay. Here's another one. Tony Khan says he probably won't use the Shockwave name. They mentioned that Tony Khan mentioned on the comments on the status of Shockwave. This is what they say. Tony Khan, they said AEW introduced the national title on November 5th edition of Dynamite, sparked some controversy. As NWA wrestlers pointed out that the NWA national title already exists and has the lineages that Tony Khan spoke of in his AEW national title introduction. From there, it was discovered by Brandon Thurston of WrestleNomics that AEW and NWA were in a legal dispute over the name Shockwave, which was a trademark filed by AEW in September of 2004. NWA filed an opposition claiming that they had been using the Shockwave name for years. This is what Tony Khan said. He said, it's an idea. It's an idea. Let me read it down. I want to make sure I get it right. This is Tony Khan's response. He says, it's an idea. I file lots of different names and ideas for shows. That was a name that I didn't know anybody else had used. I'm probably not going to do it. I had a really nice talk with Billy Corgan, who owns the NWA. When I talked to him, if that's a show you might do again, you did it first, you can do that. He said, that's great, I appreciate that. And that's from Tony Khan. So basically, the whole Shockwave deal, according to Tony, at least from what, if you believe him, he's saying, hey, I reached out to him, I talked things out, and all that, so that's why we're not going to use Shockwave, and that's fine with me. Alright, so continuing on, let me make sure I get this advertisement out of here. Get this advertisement, come on, get this advertisement. Okay. Let me see here, come on, pop up. Begin advertisements. Okay. Okay, so Tony Khan talked about Miro, or Rusev, if you will. This is what he said. This is what the article says first, and I quote. It says, Miro, Rusev, and WWE joined AEW in 2020 in a partnership with Keith Sabian. After they split, Miro became the Redeemer, going on to win the TNT Championship. After losing the title, Miro was on and off television for months, at a time, before eventually departing in 2025. He wrestled his last match at AEW World's End 2024. Speaking to Ariel Helwani, Tony Khan was asked about Miro and what went wrong. This is Tony's response. He says, Miro is a great wrestler, and he was great in AEW. He was a TNT champion. He and I just had at times different visions of things. That's okay, because everybody's entitled to different opinions and different ideas. That's what this all is, different ideas. We just kind of drifted into different ideas of what we should be doing, and that's okay. He worked in WWE before, and that clearly was a good experience for him. He clearly was excited to go back, and he did go back. I wish him the best. That must make sense for him and why he wanted to do it. And yeah, they acknowledged that Miro Rusev came back in April of this year. Now, I did talk about the counter programming. Let's see if there's any extra detail that I didn't go over. Let me check and everything. Okay, there is a little bit more. So I don't want to talk too much about it, but this is Tony Khan's response about when asked about the topic of counter programming by WWE. He says, and this is what he says. This is more detailed by Fightful. He says, "I do think it's done on purpose, and I understand it. It's part of wrestling. We've seen a lot of it, but I think other promotions that have been the challenger brand in our lifetime have seen a bit of it. Oh, have seen a lot of it too. Jim Crockett Promotions, which is the forerunner of to WCW, saw a lot of this. Jim Crockett Promotions ended up having to sell the company to Ted Turner, who then made a great run. It took a while, but if you look, Ted Turner took over at the start of 1989, and the strongest run came over 6 years later. Almost 7 years later, it started. It's interesting because as a challenger wrestling promotion, you've got a great opportunity, but it's really hard. It involves tons of investment to build up to be a strong challenger brand, and that's why we took the risk with AEW when we did. I do think that we've seen that kind of counter programming in those things, and I understand. Looking back at wrestling history, I kind of expect that. Now he also goes on to say, if with another the counter programming challenges have ever hurt AEW. This is what he says, and I quote. This is Tony Khan. He says, I think it's okay because for us, it's always worked out when we were in a great position. It was never, it has never, it's never been a thing where it cost us anything. And when you do something like AEW All in Texas, where we do the show in the afternoon, it really worked out great for us, and it was one of the biggest days of the company history, Now, he says they say to finish up the topic, Tony Khan noted that he doesn't take the situation personally. This is what Tony Khan said to finish off the topic. He says, it's very interesting. I think it's something that's part of the wrestling business, and I definitely don't take it personally. I think it's no more personal to me than it was to Jim Crockett, or maybe less so than it was with Ted Turner. But definitely all of us have seen this kind of counter programming and could speak of that. Certainly with AEW. I'm proud that we continue to run strong and be that great challenger brand in pro wrestling. I think he needs to recheck his history because they did take it personally, and that's no joke. Okay, so let's see what else they talk about. Okay, so Tony Khan says he wants to make ticket prices more affordable. Okay, so let's see what he says about that. Okay. Alright, so basically he's just saying plainly, if I highlight some of this, I will. If I link it, I will link it. But basically, Tony, he basically pointed out that he wants to keep, things affordable for people to come and enjoy the show. Now, he does talk about MJF. Here we go. It says, okay, it says, Tony Khan confirms that he expects MJF to return to AEW soon. And let me just make sure I get that advertisement off. Khan states that he's hopeful MJF will be back soon. Sean Ross Sapp pushed out the report that MJF is expected to return to All Elite Wrestling sooner than later, which could be this Saturday as the soonest. They asked the question about MJF's status was posed to AEW President Tony Khan. Khan confirmed that he is hopeful MJF will be back soon with the company. This is what Khan said. He said, I expect Max to be back hopefully very soon. Max is somebody who has been a huge part of why this has been a great year, and even though he hasn't been available every single week, I think he's done some really great things in and out of the ring this year. They do state that Max was last in action at All Out, where he fell in defeat to Mark Briscoe in a tables and tax match. After this loss, MJF said when he comes back to AEW, he'll be a changed man. Okay. Whatever that means. It could mean he's going to be more violent. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. So, yeah, it's just a lot of stuff here and everything. basically they do talk about Andrade and everything. So yeah, he again, you know, he does say, okay, this is Tony's response. He says, this is Tony Khan. He says, I think the world of Andrade. I had a great experience with him, and he left on the best of terms, the original time, and now. When he said he was free, okay, this is what Tony Khan says about Andrade. He says, I think the world of Andrade. I had a great experience with him, and he left on the best of terms, the original time. And now, when he said he was free and made his one-night appearance, I was thrilled to see him again, and anytime he's free, and whenever that is, he's absolutely always welcome in AEW. Khan was asked if Andrade misinterpreted his status before returning to AEW, and Tony replied, I can't speak to that. It is an interesting situation that I'm going to keep an eye on, but I absolutely think the world of Andrade. So, yeah, basically, he can't speak on it because I think he realizes he may have screwed up and everything. Now, other highlights are he's hopeful that Will Ospreay will return in the first half of 2026. I mentioned that he felt Darby went too far, diving through glass at Revolution. And then here we go. He talks about Killer Kross, aka Karrion Kross. Tony Khan says Killer Kross would be an interesting name to talk about joining AEW. Now, this is let me get this ad off. Hold on. It says when Karrion Kross, departed WWE in August, after realizing it wasn't a work, fans wondered what his next move would be. Kross made a surprise appearance at GCW and has been competing at various independent promotions. Some fans have wondered if AEW might be an option for him. Speaking during the interview with Ariel, Tony Khan was asked about Kross's AEW prospects. And Tony Khan says, I have not spoken to him in many years, which means he has in the past. Helwani said that he thought Kross would be a great layup for AEW. This is Tony Khan's response. He says, that's interesting, I'm not sure. I like Killer Kross. It'll be interesting at some point to talk to him again. It's been a long time since I talked to Killer Kross. It'd be interesting. He did a match with Darby. I like him. That night I had a lot of things going on, but I actually wanted to go and see his match. I didn't get to see him that night, but that probably would have been a great chance to reconnect with him. He's great. I think he's tremendous. Khan noted that he was doing a Comic-Con experience. Khan noted he was doing a Comic-Con appearance with Darby on the night Darby's match against Kross. Asked if he was surprised that WWE didn't renew Kross's contract, Khan replied, it's interesting. You never know what's going on with different wrestlers and different organizations, so I can't speak of that. I think he's very talented, and Darby said he had a great experience with him. It would definitely be worth reconnecting. We get so deep in our foxholes and thinking about things we're doing. Sometimes I get so laser focused on one thing that I think about those things. At some point, he's definitely a great name to think about. They do note that as of right now, Kross remains a free agent. And here's why Kross remains a free agent. He said it himself with Chris Van Vliet. Basically, him and Scarlett said this to an extent that, if they do go to AEW, they're going to be there to the end of their careers, or at least to the end of AEW, and raising the AEW banner high. They're going to be like front and center. But because they're so recently off of WWE right now, and people are still, getting behind them, and there's still that WWE vibe of, obviously, Triple H might bring him back and all that. They're kind of keeping their distance right now. So if he does show up, he does show up. So now the last thing they did talk about was Tony Khan says he rebuffed media rights deals for Ring of Honor, would still love to do a deal with WBD. Now this is one of the other things they do mention, because I might link this at the end. I might just link this whole thing at the end here, because I know I won't probably be able to fit all this into the description unless I just do Tony's answers and everything. But this is what Tony Khan said. Tony Khan comments on a potential media rights deal for Ring of Honor. Warner Bros. Discovery is the home of AEW, with Dynamite on TBS, Collision on TNT, both shows simulcasting on Max, and pay-per-views being available on Max. ROH, which is also owned by Khan, is currently available on Honor Club for weekly shows and pay-per-views. Speaking to Ariel on the subject, Khan was asked if he believes there is room in the media landscape for Ring of Honor, given so many platforms having ties to TKO, WWE and UFC. This is Tony Khan's response. He says, yeah, absolutely. At times there have been opportunities to do things with Ring of Honor, but they have to make sense. We did this insanely awesome great media rights deal that is so good for AEW, and I think we delivered really good value. And I think it's a great value for us. We did this deal which sets up Dynamite and Collision and pay-per-views. Is there room for Ring of Honor? I absolutely believe so. There have been good conversations with us and them. I have other media partners reach out about doing things with Ring of Honor and other companies we have never worked with. It has to make sense for everybody. The most important relationship for AEW will be with Warner Bros. Discovery. Anything I do, I want to make sense for everybody. I have actually rebuffed. I've actually rebuffed other offers from the outside at times. If we do it, I would love to do something with Warner Bros. Discovery, but it has to be a deal that makes sense for everybody. It doesn't have to be as big as the AEW deal, but it still has to be pretty good. And that's about it there. And again, he did touch upon on other things, and like I said, I might link this in the description, maybe in the corner of depending on how you watch this, I might link it as well. But basically, long story short, you could tell, and I do apologize if I was all over the place here. Again, I was, I was closing the windows and all that. I got to close my bedroom window in just a little bit as well. But anyway, you can kind of tell, and if you click on the link when I provide it, you can kind of tell what people are basically, not too fond. They're kind of like mixed about the interview. Like, you could see where it has improved and all that, depending, how you view it. You can see how it's improved, when it comes to Tony Khan, answering certain questions that Ariel would give him. But you can also kind of tell, based on what people have described, that Ariel was kind of being more cautious with Tony. Like, maybe he got talked to by his bosses, and, because he does have bosses, or else he wouldn't have a show, or wouldn't be able to broadcast the show. So he probably got talked to by his bosses and, his legal team, and basically said, hey, ease up on him this time. Don't be so hard hitting. And maybe that's why, as I mentioned earlier, I believe, that Tony's team asked for a copy of some of the questions that were going to be asked, so they could practice run with Tony before Tony got on there. That's my assumption. But again, you could see where he did improve, where he has shown some improvement, where he has, basically learned, that being Tony Khan, from the last time, that when you're going to be interviewed by someone like Ariel, you need to at least give a decent answer and all that. And he did. He did give some decent answers, some better answers, and all that. But yeah, probably one of the more, I wouldn't say controversial, but one of the more, I would probably say one of the more controversial interviews that Tony has had with anybody, because he did good in answering some questions, but he still kind of didn't ask some questions the way he should have, and you could tell at times he was falling back into his old habits of, oh, we have a great roster, it's great, it's this, it's that, it's this. He's falling back into those old habits. And what he has to understand too, like I said, that being Tony, is when you're asked about things about, the media rights deal, you should, have, you yourself, and Ariel, I will say this, he's kind of at fault for not pointing this out. You yourself should be aware of what's going to be happening with your distributing partners' future. And if I was Ariel, I would have brought that up. I would have brought up the fact that, hey, these other places might be buying WBD. They might be, working with, such and such and all that. And, Ariel, I will admit, should have at least brought that up, so that maybe we could get a more legitimate answer. Maybe, a very like, oh, I didn't know that's what was going on, or this or that from Tony. So at least it would be more like, at least Tony would be in the know. He'd be more in the know than what he is. But again, even in the transcript by Fightful, and give credit to Fightful and Sportster as well for the transcripts. You can tell that Tony did a little bit better, but you can also tell, like I said, he fell back into his old habits of basically praising AEW, going, "Oh, it's great, we have great," and and again, you can tell where people like JD and Solomonster and Just Alex and others probably will look at this and be like, "Yeah, seriously, you might have done better, but we still see through your lies. We still see through your bullshitting and all that." So yeah, you won't. So yeah, you can't blame JD for saying what he did. You can't blame Alex for reacting the way he does, or Solomon for saying what he did last night doing TNT Tuesday Night Titans with JD, or what he's going to say on Sunday during his podcast, which again I believe is going to be one of the first clips from the podcast posted on YouTube that day, or later that day, or the following Monday. But yeah, but yeah, I have to say it was, just even with the transcript, I have to say it was very, very interesting to hear Tony's answers and all that. So, let me know what your thoughts are, guys. I'll link the Ariel Helwani interview with Tony at the end here, so you can click on it if you want, and I'll try to at least put the link into the Fightful article so you guys can see it yourself. It's built. It's basically chunked to get not chunked together. It's separated in different sections and all that. So if you want to check that out, go ahead. I don't think I'll be able to, like I say, fit all of it in here because YouTube's description has a word count limit. So I don't think I'll be able to do that. But I'll put what I can here. But if I do, I'll put what I can and all that. So yeah, that's all I can really say though, guys. Let me know what your thoughts are. What did you think of the interview? Let me know if you saw it, or if you took your time in seeing it, or you just read the transcript like I did. Here, let me know your thoughts overall. And until next time, guys, do me a solid favor. Like I said at the beginning, like the video, ring the bell for notifications, subscribe to the channel, and share the video. And click on the links in the description to find my content elsewhere outside of YouTube, and to support me outside of YouTube as well. And until next time, guys, I am out.